Kwame Mensah checked his Rolex watch. 6:15 a.m. Perfect timing. He nodded to his wife Alma, who adjusted her designer sunglasses despite the early hour. They had driven 3 hours from their luxury mansion in Accra's East Legon neighborhood to this remote overlook, a place where modern Ghana gave way to ancient lands. "Come, mother. Just a few more steps," Kwame called, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the rocky path as he guided his 72-year-old mother toward the cliff edge. The morning air felt unusually cold against his face, despite the forecast for another scorching day. Mame Acua moved slowly, her traditional cloth wrapped around her thin frame, an embarrassing contrast to Alma's Versace pantsuit and diamond earrings that caught the early light. The old woman had been a constant reminder of Kwame's humble beginnings, an inconvenient truth in the carefully curated life he'd built as one of Accra's elite businessmen. "This view," Mame Acua whispered, reaching the edge and gazing out at the valley below their ancestral lands. "It speaks to my soul." Behind her, Alma's perfectly manicured nails dug into her Prada handbag. She gave Kwame the briefest nod, her red-bottomed heels planted firmly on the ground for what would come next. "After today, those mineral rights will be ours alone." Alma mouthed silently to her husband. The recent discovery of rare earth elements beneath the ancestral lands had turned this forgotten family property into a multi-million-dollar asset, one that required only the removal of its current custodian. "Mother," Kwame said, stepping closer, "I wanted to thank you for everything." Mame Acua turned, her eyes suddenly sharp with unexpected clarity. "My son, why did you really bring me here? Your heart has grown cold in that big city house." Something flickered across Kwame's face, a moment of hesitation, but vanished when Alma moved forward with determined purpose. "Look there, Mother Acua." Alma pointed toward a distant formation. "Is that where the family shrine used to stand?" As the old woman turned back to look, Kwame and Alma exchanged one final glance. Their hands moved in unison, connecting with the old woman's back with shocking force. For a suspended moment, Mame Acua teetered at the cliff's edge, her frail body no match for their strength. But as she began to fall, she twisted, her eyes locking with her son's in a gaze not of surprise, but profound, knowing disappointment. "The ancestors are watching," she said clearly, her voice carrying even as gravity pulled her away. "They see everything." Alma immediately launched into their rehearsed performance, screaming, crying out that the old woman had slipped, clutching at her husband's expensive suit jacket in fabricated panic. But Kwame couldn't move, transfixed by his mother's final words and the terrible emptiness before him. Far below, Mame Acua's body lay broken among the rocks, yet her face remained unnaturally serene, eyes open to the sky as if still watching her son and waiting. Alma pulled out her iPhone 13 Pro, her hands trembling only slightly as she dialed. "We need to call it in now," she hissed. "Remember the story? We took her to see ancestral lands. She slipped, we couldn't catch her. Tragic accident." But as Kwame reached for his phone, the screen lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed a name that sent ice through his veins. "Mother." He showed the screen to Alma, whose practiced composure cracked for the first time. The phone continued to ring in his hand, insistent and impossible. That's not possible," she whispered, backing away. "We just watched her fall." Kwame's finger hovered over the screen, trembling. When he finally swiped to answer, the line filled with nothing but the sound of wind and something else. What might have been the creaking of old wood, or perhaps the low murmur of many voices speaking at once. That was only the beginning of what would happen to the Mensahs over the next 7 days, a nightmare that would follow them from this remote cliff back to their modern mansion in Accra, proving that some crimes cannot escape justice, no matter how expensive the security system. Hello, guys. Welcome to African Tales by Zion. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and most importantly, turn on the notification bell so you can get informed when I drop another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. What would you do if ancestral spirits started haunting you through your own smart devices? Let's dive in. The Mensah's East Legon mansion buzzed with Ghana's elite. Politicians mingle with tech entrepreneurs. Celebrities pose for Instagram-worthy shots beside the infinity pool, and waitstaff in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne flutes and imported canapes. This was the third intimate gathering Kwame and Amma Mensah had hosted this month, each more extravagant than the last. Kwame, in a bespoke suit that cost more than most Ghanaians earned a year, was deep in conversation with the Minister of Technology when a ripple of uncomfortable silence spread across the terrace. He turned to see his mother, Mame Akua, shuffling toward the gathering in her traditional Kent cloth, her gray hair wrapped in a simple head tie. "My son," she called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space. "I have prepared bitter leaf soup. You must introduce your important friends to proper Ghanaian food, not these tiny foreign things." Alma's perfectly made-up face tightened with barely concealed horror. She rushed forward, her Louboutin heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "Mother Akua," she said through a forced smile. "How thoughtful. But the caterers have everything handled. Let me take you back to your quarters." The old woman resisted. "Kwame was raised on my cooking, not fancy hotel food. These people should know his roots." The minister chuckled, but Kwame detected the condescension in it. Several guests were already exchanging glances, some tapping discreetly on their phones, undoubtedly sharing this moment of social awkwardness with their networks. "Mother," Kwame said firmly, taking her arm, "you should rest. Let me walk you back." As he guided her through the mansion to the small suite they'd relegated her to, far from the main living areas, Mame Akua studied her son's face. "You are ashamed of me," she said. "Not a question, but a statement." "Of course not," he lied. "But these are important connections for my business. Certain standards are expected. I worked 3 jobs to pay for your education after your father died," she reminded him. "My hands bled washing other people's clothes so you could attend the international school. I was not too embarrassing then." Kwame felt a familiar mixture of gratitude, guilt, and resentment rise in his throat. "Things are different now. Appearances matter in my world." "And what world is that? One where you forget who you are? Where you marry a woman who thinks I am dirt on her shoe?" She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 72 years. "The ancestors would not recognize you, my son. The ancestors aren't signing my contracts or funding my ventures," he snapped, immediately regretting his tone as hurt flashed across her face. At her door, she paused. "I have lived with you for 3 years since you insisted I leave my community. Not once have you asked about our family lands or the traditions you should be upholding. Your father would be disappointed." The mention of the ancestral land stirred something in Kwame, not cultural pride, but more practical interest. He'd recently received inquiries from a mining corporation about that very property. "Get some rest, Mother," he said, softening his tone. "We'll talk about the lands another time." When he returned to the party, Alma immediately pulled him into a quiet corner, her diamond bracelets catching the light as she gripped his arm. "This cannot continue," she hissed. "Do you know Afrobergo just posted about your mother's charming traditional appearance on her social media? She's mocking us. Kwame, everyone is." "What do you suggest?" he asked, though he already knew what was coming. "There are excellent retirement facilities in the central region. Private, comfortable. She would never agree to that." "Then don't ask her," Alma said, her voice hardening. "Make the decision for her. You're her son. She's clearly becoming confused." Kwame watched his wife rejoin their guests, expertly redirecting conversations and smoothing over the awkward interruption. Alma had been a beauty queen when they met, Miss Ghana runner-up whose pageant skills had translated perfectly to their social climbing aspirations. She knew exactly which charities to support, which events to attend, which connections to nurture. Their marriage was as much a partnership as a romance. Both understood the value of strategic relationships. Later that night, after the last guest had departed, they sat in their palatial living room, Alma scrolling through event photos on her phone while Kwame nursed an expensive scotch. "We received an offer for a feature in Luxury Ghana magazine," she said without looking up. "They want to showcase our home in next month's issue. Did you accept?" "Not yet. I told them we're doing some renovations." She set down her phone, fixing him with a direct stare. "We need to resolve the mother situation before we let photographers in here. Kwame, I'm serious." From the hallway came the soft sound of shuffling slippers. Both froze, then Alma lowered her voice. "Have you told her about the mining company's interest in the ancestral lands?" "Not yet," Kwame admitted. "The situation is complicated. The land is technically in her name until she passes. I'm the sole heir, but I can't sell or lease while she's alive. Not without her consent." Alma's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "And she would never consent, would she? All that nonsense about sacred grounds and ancestors." "Exactly. According to our lawyer, even with power of attorney, any attempt to lease those lands for mining would be challenged by the village elders. They have surprising legal standing due to some indigenous rights legislation." "How much are we talking about, Kwame? For the mineral rights?" He hesitated, then named a figure that made even Alma, accustomed to luxury, inhale sharply. "That much?" "The geological surveys confirmed rare earth deposits throughout the property. In today's market, with tech manufacturing dependent on those elements." He shook his head. "We're sitting on a fortune that we can't access because my mother thinks her ancestors would be angry." Alma was silent for a long moment, her manicured fingers tapping thoughtfully against a glass. "What if something happened to her?" "What do you mean?" "People her age are fragile. Falls are the leading cause of death among the elderly." Her voice was casual, but her eyes were calculating. "It would be tragic, of course, but natural. No one would question it." Kwame stared at his wife, shock warring with a darker intrigue. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," she interrupted smoothly. "Just noting how precarious life can be at that age, especially for someone who might want one last visit to her beloved ancestral lands." The implication hung in the air between them, monstrous yet seductive in its simplicity. "She has mentioned wanting to visit the village," Kwame said slowly. "Several times, actually." "Has she? How touching." Alma's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps we should indulge her wish. A final sentimental journey." "You're talking about my mother," he said, but his protest sounded weak even to his own ears. "I'm talking about our future," Alma corrected him. "About finally claiming what should be yours, what could be ours." In the hallway, Mame Acua stood perfectly still, one hand pressed against her mouth to prevent any sound from escaping. She had come to apologize for embarrassing her son, bringing the bitter leaf soup as a peace offering. Instead, she'd heard everything. The contempt, the discussion of the lands, and most chilling, the veiled conversation about her death. Silently, she returned to her room, set down the soup bowl with trembling hands, and sank onto her bed. Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks, not for herself, but for her son, for how far he had strayed from everything she had taught him. She reached for the small wooden box she kept beside her bed, opening it to reveal a simple amulet on a leather cord. It had been passed down through generations of their family, a protection charm that also served as a warning. The old story said it safeguarded the wearer against evil, but turned against those who committed evil themselves. "Ancestors," she whispered, clutching the amulet, "guide my son back to his true path. Or if he is lost to us, let justice be done." In the living room, Kwame felt a sudden chill despite the warm night. He looked up to find Alma watching him with expectant eyes, waiting for his decision. The ancestral lands, worth millions with their mineral deposits, seemed to call to him, not with the spiritual connection his mother always described, but with promises of wealth beyond even his current success. "We could visit next weekend," he said finally. "Take her to see the old village one last time." Alma's smile widened, genuine for the first time that evening. "I think that's the right decision," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "To family traditions." As they clinked glasses, neither noticed a shadow that passed across the sleek modern art piece hanging on their wall. A shadow that resembled an old woman, head bowed in sorrow. They pushed their own mother off a cliff for money? Can you believe how they plotted against a woman who sacrificed everything for her son? If you've ever witnessed someone forget where they came from after getting rich, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. Do you think wealth changes people or just reveals who they truly are? The next chapter brings a journey with deadly intentions. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder about respecting their elders. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. 3 weeks later, the Mensa's Mercedes-Benz GLE glided along the smooth highway leading out of Accra. Kwame drove, occasionally checking his Rolex and adjusting his designer sunglasses. Alma sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, posting carefully filtered photos of the countryside with captions about reconnecting with heritage and honoring family traditions. In the back seat, Mame Acua sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the changing landscape as urban sprawl gave way to smaller communities. "We should reach the village by mid-afternoon," Kwame announced, his tone falsely cheerful. "I've arranged for us to stay at a boutique resort about 20 minutes from there. They've renovated an old colonial building, very exclusive." "Resort?" Mame Acua's voice carried disappointment. "I thought we would stay in the village. My cousin Kofi has prepared space in his compound." Alma turned, her smile tight. "Mother Acua, the village lacks basic amenities. No air conditioning, unreliable electricity, probably insects everywhere. You wouldn't be comfortable." "I lived there for 60 years before coming to your mansion," the old woman replied with quiet dignity. "Those are not discomforts to me." An uncomfortable silence filled the luxury vehicle. Kwame cleared his throat. "The resort is already paid for, Mother. Very expensive, but we'll spend our days in the village, I promise." Mame Acua nodded, returning her gaze to the window. She had barely spoken to them since the night of the party, and both had attributed her withdrawal to age and perhaps early dementia, a convenient diagnosis that supported their narrative. What they didn't know was that Mame Acua had made preparations of her own. The morning after overhearing their conversation, she had called her cousin using Kwame's housekeeper's phone. She had explained everything: the mining interests, her children's thinly veiled threats, her fears. Elder Kofi had listened gravely and promised to alert the village council. Whether they could protect her remained uncertain, but at least someone knew the truth. "Tell me about the ancestral lands," Kwame said suddenly, breaking the silence. "The boundaries, the landmarks. It's been so many years since I visited." Alma shot him a warning glance, but he ignored it. Their plan required information, specific knowledge of the property's extent and features, particularly the cliff that overlooked the eastern valley, which he remembered from childhood visits. Mame Acua studied her son's face. "Why this sudden interest? In 3 years living in your home, you've never once asked about your heritage." "This trip has made me reflective," he lied smoothly. "I realize I've neglected important aspects of our family history. I want to correct that." The old woman seemed to consider his words carefully before responding. "The land stretched from the river bend in the west to the sacred forest in the east. The northern boundary follows the old colonial road, and the southern edge is marked by the cliff face above the valley." "The cliff," Kwame repeated, exchanging a quick glance with Alma. "Is it still accessible?" "I remember it being quite a view. It has always been a powerful place," Mame Acua said. "Our people believe it is where the veil between worlds is thinnest, where ancestors can most easily hear the living." She paused and added, "and where they can cross over if needed to right great wrongs." Something in her tone sent a chill through the car. Alma quickly changed the subject, launching into a story about a client's event gone wrong. Kwame laughed in all the appropriate places, but his mind remained fixed on his mother's words. Superstition, he told himself. Nothing more. By late afternoon, they had checked into the resort, a colonial-era building with modern luxury additions that stood in stark contrast to the surrounding rural landscape. After settling in, they drove the short distance to the village, where Mame Acua was greeted with enthusiastic embraces and tears of joy from old friends and relatives. Kwame and Alma stood awkwardly at the edges of these reunions, their designer clothes and urban mannerisms marking them as outsiders despite their biological connection. Several elders regarded them with undisguised suspicion, particularly Elder Kofi, whose penetrating gaze seemed to look straight through Kwame's practiced smile. "Grandson," the old man said finally, approaching Kwame while Mame Acua was surrounded by village women. "You return after many years." "Elder Kofi," Kwame acknowledged with a respectful nod. "It's been too long." "Indeed." The elder's eyes narrowed slightly. especially for one who stands to inherit sacred responsibility. I've been busy building my business in Accra, Kwame replied defensively. So I've heard. Import-export. Very modern. Elder Kofi leaned closer. But some things are older than business. Grandson. Some bonds cannot be broken without consequence. Before Kwame could respond, Alma peered at his side, her smile brilliant but her eyes cold. Elder Kofi, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Kwame has told me so much about the village and its quaint traditions. The old man didn't return her smile. Traditions are not decorations, daughter. They are the living connections between past and future. He fixed his gaze on Kwame again. Remember this. What is done to blood returns to blood threefold. With that cryptic warning, he moved away to join Mame Acua, leaving the couple momentarily speechless. Superstitious old man, Alma muttered once he was out of earshot. This is why I hate coming to these places. Everyone speaks in riddles and portents. Just humor them, Kwame said quietly. We only need to be here for 2 days. As sunset approached, the village prepared a welcome feast. Drums were brought out, traditional foods laid on long tables, and palm wine flowed freely. Despite their initial discomfort, the Menses found themselves drawn into the celebrations. Kwame even joined a traditional dance, prompted by childhood memories and perhaps the palm wine. During a quiet moment, Mame Acua took her son's hand and led him to the edge of the gathering. Tomorrow I will show you the boundaries of our lands, she said. It is time you understood what you will someday be responsible for. I'd like that, Kwame replied, and was surprised to find he meant it. Something about being back in the village had stirred forgotten emotions, connections he'd buried beneath designer suits and business ambitions. But as he glanced across the celebration to where Alma stood, pointedly checking her watch and looking disgusted at the traditional setting, reality crashed back. The plan, the cliff, the fortune in rare earth minerals that would be his alone once his mother was gone. Later, in their resort suite, Alma paced the room while Kwame sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. That old man knows something, she insisted. Did you see how he looked at us? Like he could read our thoughts. Elder Kofi has always been perceptive, Kwame said. But he can't possibly know anything. We've told no one. Then why all that talk about what is done to blood return to blood? It felt like a threat. She stopped pacing. Maybe we should reconsider. Find another way to get control of the land. Kwame looked up sharply. There's no other way. We've been through this. As long as she's alive, those mining rights are untouchable. The contract is ready. They'll start extraction within months of my signature. But I need to be the legal owner. I know, but... No buts, he cut her off. We came here for a reason. Tomorrow, she'll show us the lands, including the cliff. It's the perfect opportunity. A tragic accident during a sentimental visit. Alma studied her husband's face, noting the hardness that had replaced his earlier hesitation. You're right, she said finally. We've come too far to back out now. She sat beside him, taking his hand. Just think of what we could do with that money, Kwame. A house in Cape Town, maybe a pied terre in London. No more scrambling for contracts or kissing up to ministers for business permits. He nodded, the vision of unlimited wealth overriding any lingering doubts. Tomorrow, then, at the cliff. In their room at Elder Kofi's compound, Mame Acua knelt before a small altar she had assembled, the ancestral amulet laid carefully at its center. Candles flickered around it, casting dancing shadows on the mud brick walls. I have seen the darkness in my son's eyes, she whispered to the silent room, and the coldness in his wife's heart. I fear what they plan. She touched the amulet gently. If I am taken before my time, do not let my passing go unmarked. Let truth be revealed and justice done. The candle flame suddenly rose higher, as though caught in a gust of wind, though the room was still. Mame Acua nodded, understanding the sign. So be it, she said softly. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Kwame and Alma arrived at the village earlier than expected, finding Mame Acua already dressed and waiting for them. She wore traditional clothes, but had added something new, a leather cord around her neck from which hung a small wooden amulet. What's that? Kwame asked, pointing to the object. Protection, she replied simply. And justice, a gift from your grandfather. She studied his face. Would you like to wear it today, my son, as we walk our ancestral lands? Something about her directness made him uncomfortable. No, thank you. I'm not superstitious. It is not superstition to respect what came before you. She sighed, then brightened artificially. But come, the day is young and there is much to see. For the next several hours, Mame Acua led them across the ancestral lands, pointing out boundary markers, sacred spots, and areas where the community grew crops or gathered medicinal plants. She shared stories of Kwame's grandparents and great-grandparents, of village history and family legends. Despite himself, Kwame found the tour fascinating, glimpses of a heritage he'd spent years trying to forget. Alma, however, grew increasingly impatient, constantly checking her phone, though there was barely signal, and asking how much longer the tour would take. Her disinterest was obvious and insulting, but Mame Acua pretended not to notice. And finally, the old woman said as midday approached, there's the Eastern Cliff, the most sacred place on our lands. It is said that from there, one can speak directly to the ancestors. I'd like to see it, Kwame said quickly, exchanging a meaningful glance with Alma. Mame Acua nodded. It is a powerful place. Are you sure you're ready to stand there, my son? Of course, he replied. Lead the way. As they followed a narrow path toward the cliff edge, Elder Kofi suddenly appeared from a side trail, as if materializing from the landscape itself. Kwame startled visibly. Grandson, the elder greeted him. I see your mother is showing you the sacred boundaries. She is, Kwame confirmed, trying to hide his annoyance at the interruption. And now you go to the cliff? Elder Kofi's gaze was piercing. A place of truth, that cliff. It is said that no light can stand at its edge. The ancestors see everything from that vantage. We're just sightseeing, Alma interjected sharply. No need to make it sound so ominous. The old man turned his attention to her. Is truth ominous to you, daughter? Interesting. He addressed Mame Acua in their local dialect, speaking too rapidly for Kwame's rusty understanding to follow. She responded in the same language, her expression grave. What was that about? Kwame demanded when they finished. Elder Kofi was reminding me of an old village, saying, Mame Acua translated smoothly, that those who stand at the cliff face judgment from beyond. Ridiculous. Alma muttered, Can we continue? It's getting hot. Elder Kofi stepped aside, but his parting words followed them up the trail. Remember, grandson, the ancestors see everything. 20 minutes later, they reached the cliff edge. The view was indeed spectacular, rolling hills giving way to a lush valley, with the glint of a river visible in the distance. Even Alma seemed momentarily impressed, taking out her phone to capture photos for social media. This is where your father asked me to be his wife, Mame Acua said, moving closer to the edge, where your grandfather spoke his final wishes before passing, where our family has marked every important transition for generations. Kwame felt a momentary pang of genuine emotion, connection to something larger than himself, to a lineage that stretched back centuries on this land. For a brief, disorienting moment, he reconsidered everything, but then Alma caught his eye, giving a subtle nod. The plan, the millions waiting to be claimed. His hesitation evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of ambition. It's a special place, he agreed, moving to stand beside his mother. Thank you for showing me. The minerals you seek, Mame Acua said suddenly, lie beneath sacred burial grounds. Did your mining friends tell you that? Kwame froze. What? The rare earth elements. They concentrate beneath the ancestral burial sites. She didn't turn to look at him, her gaze still fixed on the valley below. That's why the village council would never approve extraction. Some things are worth more than money. How did you? No. Now she turned, her eyes filled with clarity that shocked him. I know everything, my son. About the mining company. About your plans for this trip. She touched the amulet at her neck. About what you and your wife discussed that night after your party. Alma stepped forward, her composure cracking. What is she talking about, Kwame? The ancestors see everything. Mame Acua continued calmly. And so do mothers when their children plot against them. Time seemed suspended as the three stood at the cliff edge, the truth suddenly exposed between them like an open wound. Kwame felt dizzy, caught between denial and a horrifying realization that his mother had known all along. It's not too late to turn back from this path, Mame Acua said softly. To remember who you truly are, my son. For one heartbeat, redemption seemed possible. Kwame opened his mouth, though whether to confess or deny. He himself wasn't sure. But Amma moved faster than thought, desperation overriding calculation. She knows, she hissed, grabbing Kwame's arm. We can't let her leave this cliff. The moment of possible redemption shattered. In its place arose cold determination, the ruthless instinct that had helped Kwame climb across competitive business ladder. If his mother knew their plans, everything was at risk, not just the mining rights, but potentially their freedom if she spoke to authorities. I'm sorry, Mother, he said, his voice strangely calm. You're right. The ancestors see everything. He stepped closer. And soon you'll join them. What happened next occurred with horrifying swiftness. A push, a startled cry cut short, and Mame Acua disappeared over the cliff edge. But in that final moment, as she began to fall, her eyes locked with her son's. Not with fear or surprise, but with a terrible knowing acceptance. And as her body disappeared from view, her voice seemed to linger in the air around them. The ancestors see everything. Alma immediately launched into their rehearsed performance, screaming, crying out that the old woman had slipped, clutching at Kwame's arm in fabricated panic. But Kwame stood frozen at the cliff's edge, unable to look down at what they had done. Kwame. Alma's sharp voice cut through his shock. We need to call for help. Remember the plan. Mechanically, he pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, the screen lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed a name that sent ice through his veins. Mother. He showed the screen to Alma, whose practiced composure cracked for the first time. The phone continued to ring in his hand, insistent and impossible. That's not possible, she whispered, backing away. We just watched her fall. Kwame's finger hovered over the screen, trembling. When he finally swiped to answer, the line filled with nothing but the sound of wind and something else. What might have been the creaking of old wood, or perhaps the low murmur of many voices speaking at once. From the path behind them came shouts. Village men approached, led by Elder Kofi. Kwame quickly ended the call, composing his features into a mask of grief and shock. An accident, he told them, voice breaking on cue. She was standing too close to the edge. It happened so fast we couldn't catch her. Elder Kofi said nothing, merely fixing Kwame with a stare that seemed to strip away all pretense. Then he directed the younger men to go down to the valley floor to recover Mame Acua's body. You should return to your resort, he told the Menses. We will bring your mother's remains to the village for proper preparation. We should stay, Kwame protested weakly, to help. No, Elder Kofi cut him off. This is for the village to handle. You've done enough. The accusation in his voice was unmistakable, but without proof, there was nothing the old man could do. Kwame took Alma's arm, leading her back down the trail toward where they parked their Mercedes. It's done, Alma whispered once they were out of earshot. The land is yours now. Kwame nodded, but couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. The impossible call unanswered but not forgotten. Let's get back to Accra, he said. Today. As they drove away from the village, neither noticed a small wooden amulet that had somehow appeared on the backseat of their car. The same amulet Mame Acua had worn around her neck as she fell. Did you see how that evil wife pushed him to murder his own mother? And that phone call from beyond the grave. If you ever felt like someone was watching you after doing something wrong, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. Would you answer a call from someone you just watched die? The next chapter brings supernatural revenge you won't believe. Share this video with someone who believes in karma. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The Menses returned to their Accra mansion under a sky heavy with unseasonal storm clouds. As Kwame pulled into their gated driveway, Security lights flickered ominously despite the backup generators that should have prevented such irregularities. The housekeeper who greeted them at the door seemed unable to meet Kwame's eyes, mumbling condolences before hurrying away to her quarters. "We need to contact our lawyer first thing tomorrow," Amma said as they entered the marble-floored foyer, "to start the inheritance process for the lands." Kwame nodded absently, his mind still replaying the moment of his mother's fall and that impossible phone call afterward. "We should wait a respectful period," he said. "A few weeks at least. It would look suspicious to move too quickly." "A few weeks?" Alma scoffed, dropping her designer handbag onto an Italian leather sofa. "The mining company won't wait forever, Kwame. Their last email said competitors are exploring adjacent properties. We need to move fast." "My mother's body is barely cold," he snapped, immediately regretting the phrasing as the image of Mame Acua broken on the rocks flashed through his mind. "Don't be dramatic," Alma replied coldly. "We've discussed this for months. The plan worked perfectly. Now we just need to finish it." She kicked off her heels and headed toward their bedroom. "I'm taking a shower. We can discuss this more rationally over dinner." Alone in the vast living room, Kwame poured himself a double scotch, the crystal decanter suddenly feeling unnaturally heavy in his hand. He moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Accra's glittering skyline, a view that had once filled him with pride. Now he felt only a hollow emptiness, as though something essential had been carved from his chest. A reflection appeared in the window glass, a figure standing behind him. He whirled, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Taking a shaky breath, he gulped the scotch and headed to his home office. The lawyer could wait until tomorrow, but there was one call he needed to make immediately. Emmanuel Boateng, the mining company's representative, needed to know that the land would soon be available for exploration. This call, at least, was business, familiar territory that might steady his nerves. But when he reached for his desk phone, the screen was already lit, showing an active call in progress. The line identifier simply read Village. Kwame froze, finger hovering over the speaker button. No one had called. The phone hadn't rung. Yet somehow a connection was open. Cautiously, he pressed a button. "Hello?" At first, only silence answered him. Then came a sound that raised goosebumps along his arms, the rhythmic tapping of a walking stick on hard ground, exactly like the one Elder Kofi had carried. Behind that, barely audible, the murmur of many voices speaking in his mother's tribal dialect. "Who is this?" he demanded, voice cracking. The tapping stopped. A whisper came through the line, so close it seemed to be in the room with him. "The ancestors see everything." Kwame slammed the phone down, backing away from the desk. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the room's climate control. A technology glitch, he told himself. Some cross-line or system error. Nothing more. His cell phone buzzed in his pocket, a text notification. With trembling fingers, he checked the display. The message came from his mother's number, which should have been at the bottom of the cliff with her body. There was no text, only an image, the ancestral amulet she had worn around her neck. "This isn't happening," he muttered, dropping the phone as though it had burned him. From the bathroom came Alma's sudden scream, high-pitched and primal with terror. Kwame raced down the hallway, bursting through the door to find her backed against the marble tiles, soaking wet and wrapped in a towel, staring at the shower in horror. What is it?" he demanded. "The water," she gasped, pointing with a trembling hand. It turned to blood. Everywhere, the shower, the sink. Kwame looked at the shower, still running clear water. "There's nothing there, Alma. It's just water." "No." She shook her head violently, water droplets flying from her hair. "It was blood. Warm. I felt it on my skin." He approached the shower, cautiously, testing the water with his hand. "It's clean. Look." Alma stared, confusion replacing terror. "But I saw it. I felt it." "You're overwrought," he said, trying to sound calm despite his own recent experience. "It's been a difficult day. Your mind is playing tricks." She seemed about to argue, then nodded shakily. "Maybe you're right. I just need to rest." Neither mentioned their strange experiences over dinner, as though speaking them aloud might give them more power. They ate in uncomfortable silence, the usual household sounds, staff moving about, distant city noises, strangely absent. The mansion felt insulated in an unnatural stillness. After dinner, they retreated to the media room, seeking comfort in mindless entertainment. Alma scrolled through her social media accounts, already crafting the perfect grief-stricken post about her beloved mother-in-law's tragic accident. Kwame pretended to watch a Premier League match, though his mind was elsewhere. "We should plan a memorial service," Alma said suddenly. "Something tasteful but impressive. The right people should see us handling this with appropriate gravity." "The village will have traditional ceremonies," Kwame replied. "We should participate in those." Alma looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. "You can't be serious. Those primitive rituals? Our circle would be horrified." "No, we'll have a modern service here in Accra. Invite government ministers, business leaders, people who matter." "My mother deserves respect," Kwame said, surprised by his own defensiveness. "And she'll get it, just in a civilized manner." Alma returned to her phone. "I'm thinking the International Conference Center. We can have it live streamed for those who can't attend in person." As she spoke, the television screen flickered, static momentarily interrupting the football match. When the picture cleared, the game had been replaced by something else. Grainy footage of the cliff where Mame Acua had fallen. There was no sound, just a silent image of the overlook. "What channel is this?" Alma asked, frowning. Kwame checked the information display. It still showed the sports channel, though what they were seeing was definitely not football. He changed channels, but every station showed the same image, the cliff from slightly different angles. Then a figure appeared on screen, Mame Acua, standing at the cliff's edge, looking directly into the camera as though she could see them watching. Alma screamed, dropping her phone. "What is this? Turn it off." Kwame jabbed at the remote frantically, but the TV remained on, Mame Acua's gaze seeming to follow him as he moved. When he unplugged the television in desperation, the screen went dark for only a moment before lighting up again, still showing his mother, now closer to the camera, her hand extended as though reaching to the screen toward them. "This isn't possible," Alma whispered, backing toward the door. "This is some kind of sick joke." Kwame couldn't speak, transfixed by his mother's image. Her lips moved, saying something he couldn't hear but somehow understood. The ancestors see everything. Suddenly, every screen in the room activated simultaneously. Alma's phone on the floor, Kwame's tablet on the side table, even a small digital display on the sound system. Each showed Mame Acua from a different angle, all reaching toward the viewers. They fled the media room, slamming the door behind them as though that could contain whatever technological haunting had taken over their devices. In the hallway, they clung to each other, earlier tensions forgotten in the face of shared terror. "We need to leave," Alma said, her usual poise shattered. "Stay at a hotel tonight." Kwame nodded, heading for the bedroom to pack essentials. But when he opened their closet, he stopped cold. Every expensive outfit, every designer piece, Alma's couture dresses, his bespoke suits, was covered with what looked like traditional tribal markings, drawn in dark red substance that dripped slowly down the fabric. He backed away, closing the door quickly before Alma could see. His mind raced for rational explanations. A disgruntled staff member playing elaborate pranks, perhaps, or some technology hack targeting their smart home system. But deep down, he knew these explanations fell short. Packed quickly, he called to Alma, who was gathering toiletries in the bathroom. Just the essentials. As he grabbed a duffel bag from under the bed, his phone rang again, his mother's number. This time, against all better judgment, he answered immediately. "What do you want?" he hissed. The response came not in words but in sounds, the unmistakable crack of breaking bones, followed by a low moan of agony, the sounds his mother must have made when she hit the rocks below the cliff. Kwame threw the phone across the room, where it shattered against the wall, only to immediately reconstitute itself before his eyes, screen intact and still showing the active call from Mother. 20 minutes later, they were in their Mercedes, speeding toward Accra's most exclusive hotel. Neither spoke about what they'd experienced, as though silence could somehow normalize the impossible events. The hotel suite, offered temporary reprieve. New surroundings, public spaces, the comforting bustle of Ghana's elite in the lobby bar, all helped restore some sense of reality. After several drinks, Amma even managed to laugh. "We're being ridiculous," she said, the expensive champagne loosening her tongue. "Stress-induced hallucinations, that's all. The guilt and shock playing tricks on our minds." "Guilt," Kwame repeated sharply. "Figure of speech," she backpedaled smoothly. "What I meant was the trauma of witnessing such a tragic accident." The word accident hung between them like a silent accusation. Both knew there had been nothing accidental about what happened on that cliff. "We should see someone," Kwame suggested. "A psychiatrist," discreetly. "Absolutely not," Alma snapped. "Can you imagine the gossip if word got out? We just need rest. Distance from what happened. Once the inheritance is settled and the mining deal signed, we'll take a long vacation. Paris, maybe, or Monaco." Her voice took on the dreamy quality it always held when discussing luxury and status. The same tone that helped convince him they needed to eliminate his mother to secure their future. "It will all be worth it," she continued, reaching for his hand across the hotel bed. "A few difficult days now for a lifetime of unprecedented wealth." Kwame wanted desperately to believe her, to accept that their shared visions were nothing more than manifestations of stress. He squeezed her hand, forcing a smile. "You're right. We just need time." But as Amma drifted into champagne-assisted sleep beside him, Kwame lay awake, staring at shadows on the ceiling that seemed to move with unnatural purpose, forming and reforming into patterns that resembled traditional tribal symbols. The same symbols that had been drawn on their clothes in the mansion. The next morning, 3 days after Mame Acua's death, they met with their lawyer in his prestigious downtown office. Solomon Carty had represented the Menses for years, handling everything from business contracts to property acquisitions with professional discretion. If he noticed their unusual pallor or jumpiness, he didn't comment. "I've reviewed the documentation concerning the ancestral lands," he told them, adjusting his expensive glasses. "There are some complications." "What complications?" Amma demanded. "Kwame is the sole heir." "Yes, but the lands fall under traditional communal oversight," Carty explained. "Even with clear inheritance, any significant change of use, particularly mining, requires approval from the village council." "That's absurd," Alma scoffed. "It's private property." "In Western legal terms, yes. But Ghana's legal system recognizes traditional authorities in certain matters, particularly concerning ancestral lands." The lawyer looked uncomfortable. "There's also another issue. I received communication from a detective, Ajoa Boateng. She's asking questions about Mame Acua's death." Kwame felt his mouth go dry. "What kind of questions?" "Standard procedure for accidental deaths," Carty assured him, "but she's requested a formal interview with both of you." "That won't be necessary," Alma interjected. "It was a tragic accident, nothing more." The lawyer studied her face for a moment. "Nevertheless, I recommend cooperation. Detective Boateng has a reputation for thoroughness. Refusing to meet would only raise suspicions." "Fine," Kwame agreed, ignoring Alma's glare. "Set it up." As they left the lawyer's office, Alma's fury was palpable. "Why did you agree to meet this detective? We should have had Carty handle everything." "Refusing would look suspicious," Kwame pointed out. "We have nothing to hide, remember? It was an accident." They were walking through the building's marble-floored lobby when Kwame noticed something strange. The security guard at the front desk was staring at them with undisguised horror, his hand covering his mouth. "What's his problem?" Alma muttered. Then Kwame saw other people in the lobby having the same reaction, backing away, eyes wide with fear or disgust. A woman actually screamed, pointing at them before running toward the exit. "What's happening?" he asked, looking at Alma. His question died in his throat. His wife's perfect face was now covered in what looked like deep wounds, gashes that revealed bone beneath, bruises in violent purple and black, a jaw that hung at an unnatural angle. Exactly the kind of injuries one would sustain from falling off a cliff. From Alma's horrified expression as she stared at him, he realized he must look the same. "Your faces," a security guard gasped, backing away. "You need medical help." Alma fumbled for her compact mirror, hands shaking. But when she looked at their reflection, she saw only their normal appearances, no wounds, no broken bones, nothing to explain the reactions around them. "We need to go," Kwame hissed, grabbing her arm. "Now." They pushed through the revolving doors into the bright across sunshine, fleeing the horrified stares and whispered comments. In the car, Alma finally broke down, mascara-streaked tears running down her cheeks. "What's happening to us?" she sobbed. "Am I losing my mind?" Kwame gripped the steering wheel, so hard his knuckles turned white. "I don't know." But a terrible suspicion was forming in his mind, one that had roots in the stories his mother had told him as a child. Stories about ancestral justice, about wrongs that could not go unpunished, about the price of betraying blood. He drove aimlessly through Accra's congested streets, with no destination in mind except away from public eyes, away from the haunted mansion, away from the growing certainty that something beyond natural explanation was happening to them. His phone rang, the detective, requesting they come to headquarters immediately for questioning. He agreed mechanically, changing direction toward the police station. "What are you doing?" Alma demanded. "We can't talk to the police like this. We're falling apart." "We don't have a choice," Kwame replied flatly. "If we refuse, she'll come looking for us. Better to control the narrative now." Detective Ajoa Boateng was not what they expected. Instead of the grizzled veteran they had imagined, she was a poised woman in her mid-40s with intelligent eyes that seemed to see beyond their carefully constructed facades. Her office was spare but organized, with a single unusual feature, a small traditional amulet hanging beside her credentials, similar to the one Mame Acua had worn. "Thank you for coming in," she said, gesturing to the chairs opposite her desk. "I have some questions about your mother's death." "It was a terrible accident," Kwame began, reciting the story they had prepared. "We were visiting the ancestral lands, showing Mother the cliff overlooked when she stepped too close to the edge." "The cliff has a reputation," Detective Boateng noted, consulting her notes. "The locals call it the place of judgment. Did you know that?" "I'd heard something similar," Kwame admitted. "Old superstitions. Some say it's where the ancestors can most easily cross between worlds." Her gaze was unnervingly direct, particularly when called by injustice. Alma shifted uncomfortably. "We don't believe in such things, Detective." "No." Boateng smiled slightly. "Then you won't mind explaining this." She placed a plastic evidence bag on the desk between them. Inside was the ancestral amulet Mame Acua had worn, the same amulet that had appeared in Kwame's text message, the one that should have been with his mother's body. "Where did you get that?" Kwame asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It was found in the back seat of your Mercedes," the detective said. "The village elders identified it as belonging to your mother. They say she was wearing it when she fell." "That's impossible," Alma protested. "It must be a different one." "It's been in your family for generations," Boateng continued as though Alma hadn't spoken. "Used for protection and justice." She leaned forward. "Would you like to tell me what really happened on that cliff, Mr. Mensah?" Before Kwame could respond, the overhead lights in the office flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, illuminated only by faint emergency lighting, something impossible happened. The amulet in the evidence bag began to glow with an eerie internal light. Then, as they watched in horror, it moved, sliding across the desk of its own accord until it stopped directly in front of Kwame. From the corridor came the sound of a walking stick tapping on the floor, the same sound Kwame had heard on the phone. Elder Kofi appeared in the doorway, his aged face solemn in the dim light. "The ancestors have rendered their judgment," he announced. "The truth must be told." Detective Boateng's expression showed no surprise, as though elderly village elders appeared regularly in her office during power outages. "What truth?" she asked, though her eyes never left Kwame's face. "That my grandson and his wife pushed Mame Acua from a cliff," Elder Kofi said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "For money, for the minerals beneath our sacred lands." "That's a ridiculous accusation," Alma sputtered. "You have no proof." "The ancestors provide proof that modern courts cannot see," the old man replied. but perhaps this will satisfy your laws. He handed Detective Boateng a phone, Mame Acua's phone, which should have been destroyed in the fall. She recorded your conversation the night before. Elder Kofi explained, when you discuss your plan at the resort, and she sent it to me, along with a letter explaining her fears. As the detective took the phone, the glowing amulet suddenly burst from his evidence bag, leaping through the air to land around Kwame's neck, the cord tightening like a noose. He clawed at it frantically, but his fingers couldn't find purchase on the smooth wood. As it pressed against his throat, cutting off air, the office around him seemed to fade, replaced by visions of the cliff. But this time, he was the one falling, tumbling through empty space toward unforgiving rocks. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Elder Kofi's voice, as calm and implacable as judgment itself. The ancestors see everything. Did you see how the amulet attacked him in the police station? That's what happens when you betray your own blood. If you ever felt like justice comes in unexpected ways, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. Do you believe ancestral spirits can reach through technology to haunt the guilty? The next chapter brings a terrifying reckoning you won't believe. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that karma is real. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Kwame awoke in a hospital bed, handcuffed to the rail. You're under arrest for the murder of Mame Acua Mensa, Detective Boateng announced from the doorway. Where's Alma? He croaked. In another room, under guard. She studied him. You had some sort of seizure in my office. It wasn't a seizure, he whispered. She's not gone. She's everywhere. The detective leaned closer. Who? Her. The ancestors. I don't understand what's happening. After she left, Kwame lay staring at the ceiling where shadows moved in impossible patterns. His monitoring equipment malfunctioned, numbers fluctuating wildly. The television suddenly turned on, showing footage of his mother's funeral preparations in the village, events happening hundreds of kilometers away, that no news crew was recording. Elder Kofi looked directly into the non-existent camera. Justice comes in many forms, grandson. The core of the ancestors has already found you guilty. The image shifted to show two small wooden carvings being created. Figurines that resemble Kwame and Alma exactly. That night, Kwame felt a pulling sensation in his chest, as though something essential was being extracted from his very being. Part of his consciousness seemed to separate, viewing his hospital room from outside his body. He understood with terrifying clarity that something beyond physical imprisonment was beginning. Formal charges came next. First-degree murder, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. The evidence was overwhelming. Mame Acua's recorded conversation, Elder Kofi's testimony, and most damningly, cellular data tracking their movements on the cliff. During booking, Alma hissed, "This is your fault. If you hadn't hesitated, we wouldn't be here." "We murdered my mother," Kwame replied flatly. "And you're worried about blame?" "Shut up," she snapped, looking frantically at nearby officers. "It doesn't matter anymore. This," he gestured at the police station, "is the least of our problems." "What are you talking about?" "She's coming for us. The ancestors. And whatever they're planning, it's already in motion." As months passed in prison, Kwame experienced increasingly frequent episodes where his consciousness seemed to transfer elsewhere. During these dissociative states, as prison doctors called them, he found himself perceiving the world from inside the wooden figurine in the sacred cave. He could see another figurine nearby, Alma's vessel, but could neither move nor communicate. The prison psychologist noted, patient exhibits symptoms consistent with severe dissociative disorder. Reports traveling to other places while physically present. What the psychologist couldn't understand was that these weren't delusions. During these episodes, Kwame's consciousness actually transferred to the wooden figurine, experiencing the absolute stillness and silence that would eventually become his permanent state. The episodes grew longer and more frequent as months passed. During one such episode, lasting nearly 2 days, Kwame was transferred to the infirmary. When his consciousness returned to his body, he found Elder Kofi waiting beside his bed. "How?" Kwame asked. "I have connections," the old man replied. I've come to explain what is happening to you. The transferences. They're getting longer. Yes, eventually, your consciousness will remain in the figurine while your body continues its prison sentence. When your physical form dies, the transfer will be complete. And Alma, the same happens to her, though she fights it more violently. Is there no forgiveness possible? Some acts go beyond forgiveness, Elder Kofi said. The council's judgment is final. That night, Kwame felt the pulling sensation again, stronger than ever before. As his consciousness transferred to the wooden figurine, he had the terrible certainty that this time the shift might be permanent. From within the wooden prison, unable to move or speak, but fully aware, Kwame could see Alma's soul vessel nearby. In this state, they could sense each other's presence but could not communicate. Eternally separated by inches of cave air they could never cross. Can you imagine being trapped in a wooden carving, fully conscious but unable to move or speak? If you ever felt like supernatural justice is more terrifying than human courts, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. Would you rather serve life in prison or have your soul trapped in a wooden doll forever? The final chapter brings the most disturbing twist you won't believe. Share this video with someone who thinks they can get away with evil deeds. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. 5 years passed. The case of the Mensahs faded from public memory, replaced by newer scandals. Their mansion had new owners. Their social circle had closed ranks, and Accra continued its relentless pace. Detective Ajoa Boateng, now chief inspector, maintained an unusual connection to Mame Akua's village, visiting several times a year to consult with Elder Kofi on cases with additional elements. During one such visit, Elder Kofi led her along a hidden path to a cave disguised by vegetation. Few outsiders have ever been permitted here, he told her, but you should understand the full extent of the justice you helped bring about. The cave opened into a large chamber with a stone altar. Upon this altar sat 2 wooden figurines, exquisitely carved to resemble Kwame and Alma Mensah in remarkable detail. The soul vessels, Elder Kofi explained, created the night we returned Mame Akua's body to the village. Boateng approached cautiously. The figurines were unervingly lifelike, but more disturbing were their eyes, carved with it seemed to follow her movements with impossible awareness. They are conscious within, the elder confirmed, have been partially present for 5 years, becoming more fully transferred with each passing month. So they're in there? Awake? Aware? Increasingly so. Their physical bodies still serve their prison sentences, but those bodies are becoming empty vessels as their true selves transfer here. Forever, she whispered. Until the wood itself returns to dust, he confirmed. Centuries, perhaps. Throughout that time, they will remain fully conscious, able to see and hear but not speak or move. As they spoke, Boateng noticed something extraordinary. A single tear had formed at the corner of Kwame's carved eye. He's crying, she said. They remain capable of emotion, though incapable of expression. Elder Kofi then showed her a smaller adjoining chamber, containing a modern screen mounted on the ancient wall. The mining company didn't give up when the lands reverted to village control. We decided the Mensahs should witness our continued resistance. The screen displayed security footage of the ancestral lands, particularly the cliff where Mame Akua had fallen. Corporate representatives could be seen arguing with village elders, gesturing toward equipment prevented from operating. They watched as we continued to protect what they would have destroyed. Back in Accra, Boateng visited Kwame in prison. 5 years had aged him decades, his athletic frame withered, his once sharp eyes vacant. Mr. Mensah, she began, I visited the cave recently. I know, he replied, voice rusty from disuse. I saw you through wooden eyes. 10 years after imprisonment, both Mensahs had spent more time absent than present in their physical bodies. 15 years and Alma's physical body died during a prolonged catatonic state. Heart simply stopping despite no identifiable cause. In the sacred cave, the female figurine's eyes acquired tiny pinpricks of light, visible only in darkness. The vessel was now fully inhabited. 3 years later, Kwame's physical body followed, dying in the prison infirmary. The male figurine's eyes acquired the same pinpricks of inner light. Decades passed. Generations lived and died. The village expanded into a town, though the ancestral lands remained protected. 100 years after Mame Acua's murder, a real estate developer with international backing approached the now modernized town about purchasing the ancestral lands. Advanced surveys had confirmed not just the rare earth deposits known a century earlier, but newly valuable minerals for quantum computing. The town council refused unanimously. Those lands are not for sale at any price. They protect something more valuable than minerals. 250 years after the murder, a young archaeologist specializing in traditional African spiritual practices was granted unprecedented access to the cave. Dr. Esi Owusu approached the figurines with professional curiosity. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, though it should have deteriorated after so many years. Her guide nodded. They are sustained by what they contain. The souls of the murderers, Dr. Owusu said. According to your records, they've been conscious within these vessels for over 2 centuries. Exactly as the ancestors decreed, the guide confirmed. Does your tradition allow for forgiveness, for redemption, after so much time? The guide seemed surprised. You think 2.5 centuries is long? To the ancestors, it's barely a moment. Inside their wooden vessels, Kwame and Alma had witnessed the rise and fall of governments, the transformation of their once coveted lands, and the evolution of the village into a town that balanced tradition and modernity. From wooden eyes that had witnessed lifetimes passing like seasons, the human concerns that had driven them to murder seemed incomprehensibly small. The ancestors had devised a punishment that transcended ordinary concepts of justice. Through endless consciousness trapped in stillness, the menses had been forced to witness the ultimate futility of their materialistic desires. As generations lived and died, as values evolved, as the very definition of wealth transformed around them, they had sought to possess land whose value they measured only in money. Instead, they had become permanent, conscious guardians of its true worth, timeless witnesses to the ancestral wisdom they had once dismissed as primitive superstition. Chills. 2 centuries trapped in wooden dolls, forced to watch as their evil plan failed generation after generation. If you believe some punishment should last forever, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. If you had to choose between prison or being conscious in a wooden doll for 250+ years, which would you pick? This might be the most terrifying supernatural punishment we've ever shared. Share this video with someone who thinks they can escape the consequences of their actions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next bone-chilling tale.